Hi guys, and welcome to my review of the Leteciel Mira. This is a brand that I'd never heard of, and then one of you guys asked me if I was going to be reviewing it. I had actually seen it, but I didn't really pay much attention, to be honest with you. But when one of you guys did ask me if I was going to review it, I said, you know, what the hell, let me try it. It's a sub $50 IEM. I got this particular one from a store on AliExpress. I can't really remember which one, and I believe I paid $44 for it. Anyway, this is a box of the Mira. Very simple, nothing really too over the top. Inside, the IEMs came over there. The cable came attached to it already. Underneath here, some tips, a little keyring. So in terms of the accessories, the bare minimum. The tips are actually not bad, although I am not using the stock tips. I decided to use some BGVP white bores because they really made a difference in the performance. And that's basically it in essence. So it's simple, you know, it's got a nice box, I guess, with this waifu kind of theme going. And that's that. Okay, so as for the IEM, here's the IEM in itself. The Leteciel. The shell, the moment you look at the shell, it reminds you very much of the shell of the likes of, like, for example, the Pula, the RTR2. It's got that vibe of shell going. It's a very light shell. It fits very nicely. I'm using the white bores like I mentioned. The cable is a stock cable. It's actually not a bad little cable. It's all right. I mean, it's pretty decent, I guess. I did try other better cables, but I said to myself, you know what, let me just leave it with the stock cable. I'm just going to change the tips because the tips did make a big difference. So the fit is nice. The tips are the ones that made the magic happen here. It isolates quite nicely as well. And that's it. I mean, in essence, there's really not much more to say. It's well built. It's got like a resin type of shell. You can see it's got a little vent over there, metal grill. It's a nice IEM that falls within what is to be expected at this price. Okay. Anyway, let me just quickly wind this up and introduce you to the rest of the IEMs here. I've got the KB01 over here. Also a 10mm driver using a shell. Once again, it's very similar. You look at the shell and it looks like the Mira shell. I mean, they all look very, very, very similar. Wouldn't be surprised if they actually were made by the same factory. Again, using BGVP whiteboard tips, which I highly recommend if you do have the KB01, sorry. It really does make a difference. Next to that, the IVipQ 100, an IEM that I had really talked about previously in the past, and this is the latest version. This one I already bought this year, and it seems to be slightly more tightened up as compared to the 22.3 version, although the difference is not that much. And then there's the original ones, which were also pretty decent. Nice tuning. It's got all of these IEMs here, or some of these IEMs here, have got a tuning which is very much reminiscent of the QE's cadenza. Okay, so that I think that already puts things into a little bit of a context. Then obviously the Mira. Then here the Pula, the PA01. Once more, you can see the shell again, very reminiscent, very similar. Again, I'm using the BGVP white bores. I mean, fantastic on this IEM. Next to that, the RTR2. Similar shell, although a little bit smaller. Okay. Just a little bit smaller, but again, nice shell. It's using the stock tips, which are like the Leteciel tips. Next to that, another one of my favorite IEMs within this price bracket, the EPZ, the Q1 Pro. Very nicely built IEM. Similar shell once again. The formula is very, very equal to the rest of them, as you can see. Using BGVP white bores once more, and also an EPZ cable. And then finally on the right hand side here, I have the Jazeer Clear. Okay, probably the biggest of the shells out of all of them, although it's again very much the same style. And actually, I would say probably that this is the nicest looking shell out of all. Okay, so, and also the one that has actually the nicest cable. All of these IEMs priced around $50, or just below $50. Obviously, at that price range, or under $50, we have the usual culprits, the usual go-tos, which are the SimGuard EW200. Fantastic IEM, not much that can be said against it there. We have the EPZ, the Q5, another fantastic IM at that price. We have also, excuse me, we have also oh my, I had a little bit of a blank now. The 10i5, the C2 and the C3, which are again, and even the T2 Plus, are again priced more or less at this value. But I thought instead of bringing the usual ones here, let me just compare ones which we don't usually talk too much about, and I'll just throw in maybe one or two which are a little bit more popular, but not as popular as the likes of the EW200. Obviously, the EW200 in terms of its build, because it's all metal shell and so on and so forth, it's commendable that they actually are able to offer an IM at that price, SIM-GOT, with that build quality, because all of these shells here are resin. So that is an advantage that the EW200 does have. I'm not going to deny it. Now, in terms of sound, the EW200, they all sound very similar, although it's then personal preferences that will dictate what the choice is. Now, with regards to these particular ones here, there's three distinct groups. There's a group which goes from the KB all the way to the puller, which I would even say maybe even the R3, sorry, the R2, which is a group that, in essence, the bass and a good part of the mids are done very equally, and it's just then the transition from the mids to the upper mids and the treble, which are slightly different levels of intensity. The two most intense ones are the IVipQ and the Leteciel, and then this one straight after that, this after that, and the R3 is the more tame, the more relaxed, the smoothest out of all. The second type of tuning that we have here, let's put it that way, is the one of the Q1 Pro, which in terms of the mids and the highs, you could say it has somewhat the vibe of like a Puller or the R2, but in terms of the bass, it's the one that has the most, let's say, laid back mid bass. So it's the one that you would guess, or you would say in more practical terms, that bleeds the least into the mids, although truthfully, these IEMs don't bleed that much into the mids. They actually are all very, very well tuned. And then we have another third kind of style of tuning here, which is this one here, which is the bass monster. I mean, we're talking 14 dBs, if I'm not mistaken, in the bass. Absolute beast when it comes to bass. And again, touching up on that whole Hades issue, if a serious bass is what you are looking for, with a properly executed mids and highs to match up that bass, this is another very, very solid. I would take this over the Hades any day. Okay, but anyway, that's basically what we have here in this selection. Now, about the Leteciel, what can I say? Nicely executed bass. The bass is very similar to the IVipQ and Puller. Very, very nice. It's got a nice extension. It's clean. It's detailed. Good ability to resolve and do layering between whatever complexities involved in the track. Nice mids, although like I said, these two are the ones that have the highest PINA gain. But I didn't really find that either were aggressive or too forward. That you definitely do notice that forwardness in the sound. But funny enough, although this is more laid back, the KB01, this one actually sometimes sounds more forward than what these two do sound, although they are more energetic in that initial PINA gain area of 2 to 3K. Let's put it that way. Nicely done mids to upper mids, and then treble, plenty detail with these wideboard tips. Absolutely fantastic. Really nice sense of space, of air. You can't really fault it. Honestly, you cannot really fault it. in terms of its technical capabilities, like I said, soundstage is more than adequate. Imaging very nicely done as well. Detailed resolution, micro details come across perfectly. Nothing to be said against there. Resolution as well, fine. Timbre and tonality, fine. Honestly, for the price of just over $40, there's really no real major fault that I can point at it. It's a nicely executed IM. And for example, if I compare it to the likes of the KB01, I actually think that this does edge out ever so slightly the KB01. But that's just me personally. Although, and I'll repeat what I just said in the beginning, these four here are very, very similar in their way they are tuned. Very similar. They all are the more energetic of that initial style. The R2 is definitely more laid back. Well, I'll show you the graphs now in a second, you'll understand. Okay, now, compare them to these IEMs. Well, obviously, and to get this out of the way, the clear here is the one that stands out in terms of being the most different. So there's no comparison in terms of the bass. It's got monster amounts of bass, but it's a good quality monster bass. It's got proper execution. It's well done. Definitely the driver being used here has not been a low quality driver. It's definitely a high quality driver, and when you actually look at it, you can just have a look at it. It does look the driver does look let's say beefy. So this one is the one that will be the most different. Is it the most audiophile? Which of the two is the more audiophile, the more correct, the more versatile in terms of genres? Definitely the Leteciel, because it's going to be more correct sounding. But the fun and engagement, probably the Clear will give it to you. So these are side grades, and it's not really one is better than the other because they've just been tuned in two completely different manners. Okay, so this is the easiest one to straight away kind of get out of the way. Then compared to the rest, the similarity between of these four is tremendous. The two most similar, without a doubt, are the IVipQ and the Leteciel. So if you have the IVipQ, I mean, and no point in getting this, honestly, because it's not even a side grade. They are very, very identical. Same sort of bass presentation, everything. They are, like I said, I have my doubts if they're not made in the same place, and if they're not even using the exact same drivers. Compared to the KB ear, in terms of the bass, yes, they are very equal. But then in terms of the mids, upper mids and treble, I find that although graphically this seems more laid back and more relaxed, I find that this presentation is just as energetic, but on top of that, it's more satisfying. It's got more detail, especially in the upper mids and treble. It's more polished than on the KB ear. So I would choose the Leteciel over the KB ear, unless you are getting the KB ear for like a really good deal. Then I would say the Leteciel is the better choice. Now, there is one thing going for the KB ear. Obviously, it belongs to a company, with a brand which is more popular. So I'm sure if you do encounter some problem, they will probably be the more capable of resolving it than what Leteciel will. Okay. Compared to the IVipQ, I've already said. Compared to the Puller, again, very similar. Not a lot of difference between one and the other to justify side grade or one is the better. They are very, very equal. I can't really say there's a definite choice here. Ultimately, if I really go into very critical listening and I'm choosing my source a little bit more carefully, and then I would probably say the Puller does edge out ever so slightly the Mira, but very, very, very so slightly. It's just got the balance of the mids, upper mids and treble. I think it's probably just a little bit better executed than on the Mira. But that's with me, when my ears, my music. Maybe if you put in, you guys try it out, you'll find it's the other way around. So this is again another very difficult one to compare. Compared to the R2 and the K1 Pro, the Q1 Pro, then yes, again we find differences which are more noticeable, like we did in the case of the Clear. These two are very smooth. This is got about the same bass as that, but it's the opposite in terms of its mids and upper mids and treble. So I would say these two complement each other very nicely. This will be a more high energy set. This will be a more relaxed set for more maybe classical, more female vocals. Probably will be, you know, if you like listening to more relaxed jazz and so on, I would probably say the R2 will be the better choice. But they are very similar in the bass, very, very similar, but a good solid side grade to each other. And basically what I've said here applies itself again to the Q1 Pro. The Q1 Pro, I think that the thing that captivates me about the Q1 Pro, and actually on the R2, the feature that I like about these two is how smooth they are, how relaxed they are, but at the same time that doesn't come at the cost of losing detail, and how nice the tonality of these two IEMs is. These two have got very nice timbre and tonality, very, very nice timbre and tonality. It just sounds very satisfying. So there you have it, guys. I mean, it's another IEM that enters this segment, which is highly competitive. You have a ton of IEMs, in the sub $50 bracket. If you already own the Clear, this does make sense as a nice side grade. If you own the R2, again, another side grade. If you have the Q1 Pro, again, another side grade, which makes sense. But now, if you have the Puller, or if you have the IVipQ 100, or if you have the KB01, this might not make so much sense, because there isn't as a significant difference that can be picked up as it is on these three compared to the Mira. Okay, anyway, guys, I'll show you now the graphs and we'll wrap it up. Hi guys, and welcome now to the graph section here for the Leteciel Mira. This is the graph of the Mira, and as you can see, it's got a nice graph. It's got a really nice graph. It's got a nice execution of the bass, sub bass focused, nice transition into the mids. Not really, there's really no bleed, and then a significant pinna gain. We're talking about a pinna gain of about 11-12 dBs. But the interesting thing is, although it's quite significant, it's at least for me, I don't find it to be over the top or aggressive or anything of the sort. It just comes across actually quite nice. The IVipQ, as you can see, it's basically identical. Same sort of bass, same sort of pinna gain, very, very identical. I mean, just for the sake of you guys understanding what I was saying earlier about this being the style of tuning of like things like the XINHS cadenza, let me just get it here quickly so you guys can understand what I'm saying. My apologies here. XINHS cadenza, I believe this is it. There we go. You see, this is very much the style of tuning of the XINHS cadenza. The XINHS cadenza got the same sort of bass, but then this here is just a little bit more relaxed. So there you have it. Now, next one I'm going to show you here is, as I was mentioning, in the progression of them being similar in their overall execution of the bass, but then the mids coming down gradually. Then we have the Puller. Let me just take away the IVipQ. The Puller, again, very similar bass. I mean, this difference here is not even noticeable, but then this does drop down, and by dropping down like it did here, and it's, I mean, we're down to a pinna gain which is now 9 dBs roughly. So that there does make that the balance between the two extremes becomes slightly warmer, slightly, the tonality slightly more lush. Okay, but again, it's all going to be very dependent on how deep you're going to fit the IM, how well it fits you, what source you're using. Okay, then on that continued type of tuning, then we get the KB ear, again very similar. And interestingly enough, although you can see that it seems like the Mira is going to be the one that overall is a little bit more brighter or so on. No, there are instances that actually the KB ear does sound a little bit more brighter, or a little bit more lively, and a little bit less polished at times. Okay, and then finally the one that changes a little bit that whole vibe is then the R3. The R3 does away with that really aggressive pinna gain, and we're talking about a pinna gain which is now centered at around 7 dBs, 8 dBs roughly. and that makes then for that smoothness that I was talking about. It's a really very easy IM to listen to, very smooth, very relaxed. Okay, then continuing yet again in that sort, we have now the Jazeera Clear. Actually, let me show you. Sorry, the Q1 Pro. And the Q1 Pro is the first one that, yes, you do notice that in terms of the bass, the Leteciel does have just a little bit more mid bass because it scoops earlier. It kind of dies down earlier. It's the one that definitely bleeds the least. But overall, the rest is very similar. You do have a slight shift in the type of sound, but interestingly enough, the K1 Pro and the R3, this one, these two, they sound surprisingly similar. I can't really understand why, because graphically, you wouldn't think so. But the Q1 Pro and the R2 sound smooth and with the kind of same of sort of tonality and energy level throughout. And then finally, the one here that then does completely change this dynamics is the Clear. A bass monster, as you can see, absolute bass monster. Pin gain peaks at about 5k, but because you have so much bass, whatever aggressiveness this peak might eventually show gets totally calmed down, brought down. And actually, I would even say that there does help clean up the bass and give it that incisiveness that it has. And although you can see that it bleeds into the mids and so on and so forth, it doesn't sound as bad as you would probably think. Seriously, when I say that the Clear has got really good bass, it has got really good bass. And I've always said that from day one. People, when they looked at the graph, were kind of a little bit worried, but this thing really, really plays well. It's got a tuning which is very similar to the Rose Finch, just a lot more energetic than the Rose Finch in stock format. Once you retune the Rose Finch, then the Rose Finch retuned becomes very similar to the Clear, very similar. In terms of the bass, they are very, very equal. And there you have it, guys. Like I said, the Mira is a solid IM. It enters another very competitive segment, and which means that if you have some of the IMs that I mentioned, maybe it doesn't make sense. If you don't have it, then yes, it could make sense. And some of the IMs that I also mentioned are possible side grades, so you can complement more or have a wider genre of music that you can focus on when you feel like it. All right. As always, like and subscribe. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. You take care now. Bye-bye.